Thanks, Brenton, for your kind words. Yes, Siemens has indeed been around South Australia since 1872. Anybody that's involved in large projects in this nation will know that they don't always come out the right way in terms of the contribution that the shareholders were hoping to get, but the piece of infrastructure gets built. So Siemens were actually, if you want to bookend that, involved in the Overland Telegraph, and it was a financial challenge for the organisation in 1872, as after we laid miles and miles of telegraph wire with porcelain insulators, the traditional owners of the land actually realised that if they threw stones at those things and knocked them down, they were very, very sharp, and they could use those for their weapons in the field. So that project took a lot longer than what we thought. And the next bookend that I wanted to talk about was the NBN, which we're also associated with in its early days, and that was also rather a financial challenge. But we're still here. Once again, Melinda, thanks to CEDA. First off, for providing us all with these sorts of platforms to exchange views on the opportunities and challenges facing policy decision makers for creating that sustainable future and prosperity that we're looking for in the nation. Siemens' sponsorship today and co-sponsorship today is all about providing that platform. We're very, very grateful to have that chance. I'd like to pay also my respects to the traditional owners of this land that we're meeting on, and of course their elders, both past and present. I'll start just with a few slides, changing the theme from some economic graphs. That actually is Hornsdale Wind Farm here in South Australia, with some traditional artworks around it. And I guess if you come across, I'll admit to being from Melbourne, but I'm very frequently here in South Australia. But if you come across, you can't help but realise how closely connected South Australia is to its natural resources, the land, and all of those things that generate so much, and the interrelated benefits that come with the natural resources that we have. Arguably, there's no state in Australia that's actually done more in terms of the energy transition to take us from where we were as a fossil-based, carbonised economy to what that future looks like, with all the pain associated with that. And when I say no state has done more, that is leadership in action. You build it, and then you keep looking forward, and you work out what you've got to do to address the sorts of things that you didn't anticipate when you started that journey. And I can only commend the sort of attitude and that pioneering spirit that still exists here in South Australia in that transition. There is then no better place than South Australia to start to talk about energy and the challenges, and to also give you some perspectives of what that energy future might include, and what the state government or the state has been doing to utilise those assets that have been built to create other industries and other benefits for the future of the state. 2 years ago, big storm, knocked down some transmission lines. Funny thing with transmission lines and power is that it doesn't run as well when it's lying sideways in the paddock. And everyone said, oh, it's renewables. And we got onto this discussion about storage. And we got onto the discussion about some very large batteries by some entrepreneurs in the world, which is all good. This particular diagram, I just want to put some context. Energy storage is not just about a single form of battery that you might imagine in the back of a torch. Energy storage is talking about, if you look about the bottom scale there, it's an exponential scale. How long do you actually want to release that energy for? 1 megawatt hour of lithium-ion battery will last you 1 hour, and then you better have some candles if you haven't got something else. And the point on that bubble graph is looking at a number of technologies that are applied for a certain application. If I'm looking for very low amounts of power for a very fast discharge, then there are certain technologies, battery technologies on the left-hand side, that are the right application. If you're talking for massive amounts of power over long periods of time that you want to release into the system where you otherwise don't have power, then you end up in the top of that bubble graph at gases. Right? And pumped hydros across on the right-hand side, but you end up with gases. And the heaviest carrier of energy by weight is in fact hydrogen. And the state government has been doing a lot of work to try to paint the picture of how we can master hydrogen, given that we have our current status of large renewable installation and that need to stabilise and release power over longer periods of time. That's the challenge. So no technology is wrong. The question is, which application are you trying to solve? That's a little journey that I guess Siemens have been personally attached to. Sorry, I'll just go back. This morning I noticed, if anybody read the press from Minister Koutsantonis, they've announced actually a 25% storage target, 750 megawatts by 2025, and actually are lifting their own renewable energy target to 75% by 2025. For the state, not just the City of Adelaide. So this continuing pressure to keep that momentum rolling forward will require additional technologies. This particular slide that we put together is talking about a journey we've been on with the state. Starting in 2012, we signed an MOU with the state to talk about decentralised energy systems to transition fossil fuels to renewables, the redevelopment of Conolly as an anchor tenant to create an environment between university, TAFE, industry to co-create, if you like, that future of manufacturing. We delivered to the state a city performance tool, which is a roadmap of what are the lowest hanging fruits to get the City of Adelaide to be carbon free by a certain target. See the opening of Tonsley down the bottom in the picture there. We contributed very heavily to the Finkel Review. The Finkel Review, in respect to Alan Finkel, was a completely, in my personal point of view, we contributed directly, was a very apolitical document. If you know Alan Finkel, he was fiercely protective of the integrity of that report. And I think it will stand a test of time as a roadmap for us to follow going through governments, both state and federal. But at the end of that particular document, the Finkel Review, the Energy Report, he actually finally turned the page on hydrogen. And he realised that there's this capability that we need to build that if we can tap into, there's a lot of additional benefit for Australia, particularly with its natural resources. South Australia produced, with help of a number of organisations, this hydrogen roadmap and has started to make announcements in the last weeks about the sorts of test facilities and pilot programs to get used to using hydrogen in different applications. And finally, Bill Ferris has been working nationally to come up with the innovation agenda. And the challenge that he had from those that were contributing to that paper nationally was, can we come up with moonshot projects that would take Australia's innovative capability to things that are naturally synergetic with what we need to be successful in the long-term future. And there were three, anybody who's read those couple of hundred pages at the end, there is three projects mentioned there. One is saving the barrier reef. Of course, there's a tourism element and a vested interest in saving the barrier reef, but there are all those sorts of technologies associated with what you need to do that we build skill up to, which is exportable to the world. First moonshot project. The second was the aspiration that why shouldn't Australian people enjoy the longest lives of any nation and of any place on the planet? And what are all of the healthcare things that need to be put in place and technologies that need to be put in place to facilitate that? Quite aspirational. And quite proudly, the third of those moonshot projects was actually a hydrogen city as a candidate for the moonshot project. And the idea there would be to take a city of up to 100,000 people and fully reticulate its gas pipelines on carbon-free gas. So quite an exciting time, and I would just... Now, don't get lost in the middle of that. I'll just talk about the left-hand side and then the right-hand side. The left-hand side is basically saying, if you have gone from an energy system of single place of generation, fossil, transporting down long transmission lines to a city where they consume, and you move into a decentralised energy system where multiple users are sending power in different directions, you actually create much more intermittency. Because of the intermittency, you create much more capacity. That means traditionally we would have built as electrical engineers and power generation 15% spare capacity in any of the spinning turbines. Because you build multiple wind or solar, they're not used all the time. So when you aggregate up the suboptimal units, you've got this massive spare capacity waiting to be utilised as an asset. Anybody who runs any asset knows the more I can run that thing, the better the economy is attached to it. South Australia has a massive renewable energy installation per capita. So how can we let those windmills spin when actually we don't need to consume the power? And how can we convert that form of energy, wind, into something else? And this is a storyline that's talking about the production of hydrogen using electricity. So you're applying electricity onto water and you just simply split off the hydrogen and the oxygen. And you've created a massive, potentially massive pools of energy to be reused elsewhere when you need them. From a clean piece of paper, you wouldn't do that because you wouldn't build a wind farm simply for the purpose of producing hydrogen. But if it's there anyway, how do I sweat that asset? How do I get more out of it? Creates the sort of business plan and ideas that have been generated in that Moonshot project. And across on the right-hand side, hydrogen is a growing phenomena around the world. Whether we're talking about in homes, commercial, residential, large trucks, buses, highly polluting, big stop-start, huge energy demand. If we're talking about, you can re-electrify hydrogen. There are turbines that burn on 95% hydrogen, for example, already. So you create from one form of energy, you store it, and you re-electrify with a rotating machine at a later point. I'm a bit proud of that next one. That, by the way, is submarine. I'm in friendly territory. I know that I've got Andy Kerr with me, the head of Saab in Australia. We actually started promoting at that time the German technologies for air-independent propulsion on submarines, and which actually is actually a fuel cell hydrogen-based. But again, you build the industry capability and then you're able to export that capability. And in the bottom, of course, you can reticulate. Use the gas that you've created, the hydrogen you've created, put it through existing gas lines, mix it, and you actually have a clean burning fuel. So put all together, it's not just a story about using industrial hydrogen for its existing purposes. It's about multiple applications with something that's being generated from assets that are not fully utilised. And through that storyline, we actually solve a couple of topics because, of course, hydrogen, when it burns, there's no pollutant. And it fits very, very closely to the visionary sorts of things that South Australia have been doing in the field of energy. Very proud to announce that today the Australian Gas Infrastructure Group, I know I've got some colleagues in the room over that side, congratulations on getting that $11 million project up for a demonstrated plant at Tonsley. We'll be using the solar generation capability at the Tonsley Park, the ex-Mitsubishi car manufacturing plant, using one of the electrolyzers, 1.25 megawatts, to actually produce hydrogen and be able to take off some of the load when we've got excess power from those solar tops on the building. A great initiative, and it's again absolutely hand in glove to having done a lot in renewables. What's next? It's not about stopping now. We have to keep going. This forum, the CEDA forum, for me is very much an exemplar of what it takes to actually solve complex problems in society. I was mentioned a moment ago, chair the Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 task force. Industry 4.0 doesn't exist today, and if anybody tells you they can sell you one, they probably need to go back and read the manifesto, because it's about a journey. And it's about a societal journey of preparing the workforce for that future that's going to be surrounded by a manufacturing environment that is a cyber-physical manufacturing environment. So what do the jobs of the future look like? What do the technologies look like? What do the standards look like? So there's a big framework to be able to get us ready for that ultimate future. And that's something that no industrial company can do alone. Certainly organised labour can't do it alone, governments can't do it alone, and it actually requires a lot of collaboration. So on that note, thanks very much for listening, and look forward to the next speaker. Thank you.